Okay, what we've got here today is a working prototype of 3D Studio DOS. It's about a year, almost 2 years before it was released. This is November of 1988, and the program was released in the latter part of 1990. So this was well over a year and a half before the program came out. This is an extremely early prototype that we were working on back then. Running this in a DOSBox application under Windows XP, and just totally amazed this thing even works at all. You'll notice a lot of things in this that are familiar. The command columns over here on the right side, that's pretty much, it's very similar to the way it was in the final program, but the structure of it, this was an early version that used a different format that we were trying out to see how it would work as far as uh, giving you the controls you needed without taking up too much screen real estate and being something reasonable. You notice as I click on vertex, it gave the options that are available for it. If I right click, it would go back to the adjust options. You can go to polygon and I give those. In this particular case, it would leave the selection where it was and drop the options, the control, the commands basically below it. We also had a version in here that we could go over and go into the test section and change the choice trees back to an old style. And this stacked them, no matter what you were working with, it always stacked them high on the screen. We went through several iterations of this during the uh, development, and this was the original, and then we changed to a different one, and we changed another one yet after that. It was quite a process. Jack Powell had us, you know, change that around so it was working a lot more reasonably. I'll go back to the new format just for grins. The new as of 1988. Anyway, you'll see some familiar stuff in here. The program has a setup for a 2D shaper, what we later called the Lofter 3D editor. And this is so early. Materials, lighting, and this other stuff isn't even installed yet. In fact, these other functions here, for a lot of them, you'll see that they don't have anything hooked up yet. But it's kind of a piece of history. Thought it might be kind of fun to look at. The 2D shaper, uh, this was pretty rudimentary. We have our basic functions like creating lines. Uh, there weren't, the spline controls were not in there yet for adjusting the handles. In fact, this is so early that there aren't even it isn't even Bezier splines. They're only controls are tension, continuity, and bias on the various vertices. Uh, and we later changed that to be much more versatile Bezier with the handles and stuff. Much more familiar to everybody now. But there was a basic curve which used kind of a fixed tension and continuity and bias, and then you can go and modify those. We'll show you that in a minute. Typical functions here: quad, circle, ellipse, that kind of stuff. But this was what we started out with, just to get the functions working, to make sure it was, heck, we just had to get started with somewhere. Ngon is not hooked up in here yet, unfortunately. In fact, the release notes on this version that I had basically were asking Jack and Gary what to do about that, if they had any ideas for the interface for it. Let's see. So we've got copy functions. You can copy splines around. You can mirror them. Well, I guess you can't mirror them. Maybe that wasn't in there yet. You can open them up, close them back up if they're open, like this one here. I don't think outline was working. No. Select or selection, you can do at vertex, single vertex regions, that kind of thing. That all worked. Right click, go to polygon. That wasn't hooked up for that yet. Single polygon selection was working though. Adjusting, this is kind of fun. Vertex, you can drag and rotate scale. Going into the splines on the vertex, you can actually change the tension on here. The tension, let's see, oh, there we go. It's been a while since I've used this, so the clicking conventions are a little different. Kind of a neat little system here. It wasn't as direct as the handles, but it worked. Continuity, that control there kind of diverges the vectors. Bias will I think basically rotate. Yeah, or okay, it swings them back and out. Okay, you can turn them into a line, linear, or to the standard curve tension continuity bias parameters. And then there's some stuff in here for shape assignment for the lofting process. That doesn't actually work. It's just that the choice tree pops out its ID, so that we could figure out what was needed to be hooked up. Let's see. There's the views are pretty much. You'll see this is pretty much the way it wound up in the final version. This didn't change much at all. It just isn't hooked up. I was just getting it ready. You could set these up, but not change the views. The 3D modeler, that was our lofter. There wasn't anything hooked up in here, I don't think, at all. Very, very early. Yeah, nothing's really hooked up. And then the 3D editor. We have places in here for making things, but I don't think any of them are hooked up. Nope. You see, it's very early. There's places where we had spots for texture assignment, things like that, and the interface wasn't even close to designed yet. We just put in dummy selections. This was almost a year. I'd say almost a year before Dan Silva entered the group, and he of course did the original keyframer, but none of that choreography. I think that's what we were going to call the keyframer. That wasn't in there. There was a camera section which we wound up taking out, and lighting. That all got integrated into the 3D editor. The renderer, of course, was there. It was actually a separate module in the original design. In fact, all these wound up being separate models. The shaper, lofter, and editor were a module. The keyframer was going to be a module, and the renderer and materials, I think, were going to be modules. And they swapped in and out of memory, and it was a real pain to use. And we got rid of that about 3 months before release. Re-architected the program to run under a DOS extender, and it was all one program, which was a godsend. It was way better than what might have been. But that's pretty much it. We didn't really have too much working in this. There were some things hooked up, obviously, like this rendered background selection was there. Procedure, interesting. That was changed. But it's just an interesting little program, the current status, objects and stuff like that. Of course, none of that's actually hooked up yet. None of the, I don't think we have any of the, well, it is actually hooked up, but it doesn't really work right. Viewport rotation. A lot of the stuff if you've used 3D Studio DOS, it looks familiar, and clearly the interface didn't evolve too much from where we started. But this is quite early, and I think the fun part is seeing how this command column system worked versus the way it ended up in the final thing. But this ran under straight DOS. It was using an overlay linker. It was using Microsoft's compiler with an overlay linker, so we could have, it would swap code in and out of memory as needed. We actually wound up changing that shortly before release, so we changed over to the High C compiler and the DOS extender from Farlap, and that was like I said, is a real godsend. It was a great move. It took Dan and me about a week of pretty intensive coding at Dan's house to finish that up and get it switched over, and it made a huge difference in the workflow of the program. But that's pretty much it. Just wanted to let you see how this thing worked. It was a pretty early prototype, little piece of history, and it was fun to go back and look at it. And I was really pleased it actually still ran.